Melania Trump had always been a figure of quiet strength, a deliberate and measured presence in the whirlwind of American politics. For years, she had stood beside her husband, Donald Trump, a sentinel in stilettos, her silence often interpreted as complicity, her rare public speeches parsed for hidden meanings. But on a crisp autumn morning in Washington, D.C., that silence was shattered. The catalyst was a cultural flashpoint, a new controversial initiative from the Trump administration aimed at empowering children through digital literacy had been misconstrued by the media as an attack on public schools. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Headlines screamed of a war on education, and Melania, the First Lady who had made Be Best her platform, watched as her legacy was being buried under an avalanche of misinterpretation. In the quiet of the White House residence, she made a decision. She would not let her work be defined by others. She would speak directly to the American people. Her team arranged an exclusive interview with a reputable, nonpartisan journalist in the Rose Garden. The setting was intentional, open, transparent, a stark contrast to the closed-door meetings that often defined Washington. As she sat across from the journalist, her posture was impeccable, her expression serene yet resolute. "Mrs. Trump," the journalist began, "the response to the Digital Future for Children initiative has been intense. What is your response to those who say this is a government overreach into local education?" Melania's gaze was steady. "I have never believed in government overreach," she said, her Slovenian accent lending a unique cadence to her precise English. "My focus is and always has been on the well-being of our next generation. This initiative is not about telling schools what to do. It is about giving parents and children the tools to navigate a world that is increasingly digital and, frankly, dangerous. It is about online safety, cyberbullying, and mental health. If that is controversial, then I am proud to be at the center of the controversy." The interview aired that evening. Clips of her poised, direct responses went viral. For the first time, she was not just a silent partner, but a principal actor in the national conversation. Her approval ratings, always a topic of speculation, saw a modest but noticeable bump. She had stepped into the debate, and the political landscape shifted. Across town, in a luxurious home in a gated community, another former First Lady watched the coverage with a mixture of professional admiration and deep-seated political alarm. Michelle Obama had spent the years since leaving the White House building a powerful global platform of her own. She was a best-selling author, a podcast host, and a leading voice for women's rights, education, and healthy families. She was, arguably, the most beloved Democratic figure in the country. Her advisors had been buzzing all morning. Melania's interview was not just a human interest story, it was a political event. It was a reminder that the role of First Lady, though unelected, carried immense soft power. For years, Michelle had subtly countered the Trump administration's policies through her own work, but she had rarely, if ever, directly engaged with Melania herself. That, she realized, had to change. A few days later, Michelle was a keynote speaker at a summit for the United Nations Foundation, focused on girls' education globally. The venue was a grand convention center in downtown D.C., filled with delegates, activists, and media from around the world. Her speech was pre-written, focusing on the importance of access to education in developing nations. But as she stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of expectant faces, she felt the weight of the moment. She set aside her prepared remarks. "You know," she began, a familiar, warm smile on her face, "I was sitting at home the other night watching the news like everyone else, and I saw a conversation about our children,
a conversation about their future in this digital world, and I thought to myself, finally, we are talking about the right things. The audience was silent, captivated. They knew she wasn't just talking about a news segment. But then, Michelle continued, her voice gaining a familiar, passionate timbre. But then I listened a little closer, and I heard a narrative that seemed to forget the decades of work that have come before. The libraries built, the after-school programs funded, the teachers supported. An initiative is wonderful, a conversation is important, but where is the context? Where is the acknowledgement that this is not a starting line, but a relay race? And if you're going to jump into the race, you have to be willing to pass the baton, not just grab it for a victory lap.
The implication was clear. She was calling out what she saw as an attempt by the Trump administration to co-opt an issue that Democrats had championed for generations. The crowd erupted in applause. The pundits went wild. The phrase relay race became the headline of every political blog and cable news chyron. Melania Trump steps into the debate. Michelle Obama fires back. The narrative was set. The two most powerful women in the American public eye were now engaged in a very public, very nuanced war of words. It wasn't about policy specifics, but about legacy, ownership, and the very definition of what it meant to serve the nation's children. The White House press corps was in a frenzy. The East Wing, typically a bastion of carefully curated, non-controversial events, was now the epicenter of a political storm. Melania's communications director, Stephanie Grisham, was fielding calls from every major network. Inside the residence, the mood was one of steely determination. Melania read the transcripts of Michelle's speech in the treaty room, a place she often used for her private work. She read them not with anger, but with a quiet, analytical focus. She saw it for what it was, a challenge. A challenge not to her intelligence, but to her legitimacy in this space. Her first instinct, counseled by her advisors, was to ignore it, to take the high road. Let her have her moment, they said. We focus on the work. But Melania felt differently. For years, she had been the one who was ignored, talked over, and underestimated. She had been the other First Lady, the former model from a communist country, the wife of a reality TV star turned president. She had been silent, but she had not been blind. She had seen how Michelle Obama was lauded for her every move, how her initiatives were celebrated, how her speeches were quoted like scripture. The comparison had always been there, a silent undercurrent in every article written about her. Now that undercurrent had surfaced. Michelle Obama had, publicly, if indirectly, dismissed her, and Melania decided she would not let it stand. A week later, Melania scheduled a visit to a public elementary school in a working-class neighborhood in Virginia. It was a school that had benefited from a technology grant from a private foundation, not a federal program. The visit was ostensibly to promote Be Best, but everyone knew it was a response. As she walked through the school's library, surrounded by children reading on new tablets, a reporter shouted a question. "Mrs. Trump, what is your response to Mrs. Obama's comments about the relay race?" Melania paused. She turned, her expression as composed as ever. She looked directly at the camera. "I believe every generation has a responsibility to do its part. We cannot be bound by the past. We must look to the future. We can respect those who came before while also forging our own path. My focus is on the children of today, in this moment, and what they need right now. The baton is not a trophy to be passed around. It is a tool to build with." The response was elegant and cutting. It reframed the entire argument. Michelle Obama had spoken of continuity. Melania spoke of innovation. Michelle had spoken of legacy. Melania spoke of immediacy. The battle lines were drawn. The media pitted them against each other endlessly.
Commentators analyzed their fashion choices as coded messages. Michelle wore suffragette white. Melania wore a military-inspired coat. Michelle quoted Maya Angelou. Melania referenced her own immigrant story. Every public appearance was scrutinized, every word parsed. Behind the scenes, both women were navigating treacherous waters. Melania, in the White House, found an unlikely ally in her husband's political advisors. They saw her new assertiveness as a powerful tool for the 2020 election, a way to soften the administration's image and appeal to suburban women. They encouraged her, feeding her policy points and scheduling more high-profile events. Melania accepted their help, but on her own terms. She was not going to be a puppet. She insisted on controlling her own message, often rewriting speeches late into the night, her notes a mix of Slovenian and English. Her relationship with Donald during this time was complex. He was proud of the attention she was getting, but also slightly jealous of the positive press. "They love you now," he told her one night in the residence, a hint of petulance in his voice. "Wait until you do something they don't like." Melania simply looked at him. "I am used to it," she said. Meanwhile, Michelle Obama was grappling with her own set of challenges. She was no longer a political candidate, but she was undeniably a political force. Her support was highly sought after by Democratic candidates. Her every move was seen through the lens of the 2020 election. Did her criticism of Melania help or hurt the eventual Democratic nominee? Was she energizing the base or alienating moderate voters who might be sympathetic to the First Lady's message on children? She discussed it with her husband, Iraq. They walked through the manicured gardens of their Colorama home, their Secret Service detail a respectful distance away. "You can't let them define you," Iraq advised, his voice calm and thoughtful. "You're not running against her. You're speaking your truth. If your truth happens to contrast with hers, that's not your fault."
But it feels personal now, Michelle admitted. It felt like a policy disagreement, but now it's different. She's good, I have to give her that. She's taking everything I throw and turning it into something else. "Then stop throwing," Barack said with a gentle smile. "Do your work. Let her do hers. The people will decide whose vision resonates." Michelle knew he was right, but it was hard. The media ecosystem demanded conflict. The more they were pitted against each other, the more their profiles grew, and the more they were forced to respond. The next major confrontation came during the holiday season. The White House Christmas decorations are always a highly anticipated event, a chance for the First Lady to showcase her style and set a theme for the nation. Melania chose a theme of American spirit, decorating the East Wing with a stunning display of red, white, and blue, with a focus on honoring military families and first responders. The centerpiece was a towering tree decorated with thousands of small American flags and handwritten letters from children thanking service members. The reveal was met with widespread praise. It was patriotic, inclusive, and deeply personal. Melania, in a video tour, spoke movingly about the sacrifices of military families, her voice soft with empathy. "They are the true spirit of America," she said. It was a masterstroke. It was impossible to criticize without seeming unpatriotic. Michelle Obama watched the coverage from her home. She could have let it go, but she had spent 8 Christmases in the White House. She knew the power of the imagery. She also knew that underneath the surface of American spirit was an administration that had a complicated and often contentious relationship with the military, particularly regarding transgender service members and veterans affairs. A few days later, Michelle and Barack released their annual family Christmas card. It was a warm, intimate photo of the two of them, smiling casually. But the accompanying message on their social media channels was more pointed. It spoke of the importance of service, sacrifice, and remembering the values that truly make a country great: kindness, empathy, and looking out for one another.
It ended with a quote from Nelson Mandela. "What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead." Again, the message was clear. It was a subtle rebuke. It was saying patriotism isn't just flags and ceremonies. It's about policy and compassion. The media pounced. Michelle Obama's Christmas message, a subtle dig at Melania's American spirit, read one headline. Melania felt the sting. It was becoming a pattern. Every time she tried to establish her own identity, Michelle Obama was there, a ghost at the feast, reminding everyone of a different standard, a different way of doing things. The public comparison was relentless. Polls consistently showed Michelle Obama as one of the most admired women in the world, while Melania's numbers, though improved, lagged far behind. The pressure began to take a toll. Melania, always private, became even more guarded. She trusted only a tiny inner circle, her chief of staff, her longtime stylist, and her son, Barron. She confided in Barron more than anyone. At 13, he was a tall, thoughtful boy, navigating the difficulties of being a teenager in the White House with remarkable poise. "They're always comparing you," Barron said one evening as they ate dinner alone in the residence. "I know," Michelle said quietly. "It's not fair. You're not her. You're you." His simple, profound statement brought tears to her eyes. He was right. She had been so focused on the comparison, on defending herself against Michelle's implied criticisms, that she had lost sight of her own voice. She had been reacting, not acting. The next morning, she made a decision. She would stop playing defense. She would go back to what mattered, her work. She had her team quietly organize a visit to a foster care facility in a rural part of Pennsylvania. It was a small, unannounced event, away from the D.C. press corps. She spent hours there, sitting with children, listening to social workers, learning about the systemic challenges of the foster system. It was a topic far removed from digital literacy or Christmas decorations. It was raw, difficult, and deeply human. Word of the visit eventually leaked, but without the usual fanfare. The photos that emerged showed Melania in a simple sweater, sitting on the floor playing with a toddler, her face etched with genuine emotion. It was a different image of her, unguarded, present. The story ran on the inside pages of newspapers, not the front. It didn't generate the same buzz as her previous clashes with Michelle, but for Melania, it was a small victory. It was her work, on her terms. Michelle Obama heard about the visit through her network. She was intrigued. She had to admit it was a smart move. It was authentic. It was hard to criticize someone for spending time with foster children. It made her realize that perhaps she had misjudged her. Perhaps the conflict wasn't as black and white as the media painted it. She mentioned it to Valerie Jarrett, her closest advisor and friend. "Maybe we've been too hard on her," Michelle mused. Valerie shook her head. "Michelle, she represents an administration that has rolled back protections for children in foster care, that has separated families at the border. A photo op doesn't change that." "I know," Michelle sighed, "but she's not the administration. She's a person. And maybe the way we're going about this is making her a symbol, not a person." It was a moment of introspection for Michelle. She prided herself on empathy, on seeing the humanity in everyone. Had she failed to do that with Melania? Had she let her political opposition to Donald Trump color her view of his wife to the point of unfairness? The thought nagged at her, but before she could act on it, the political world exploded. A tell-all book by a former White House staffer was released, painting a deeply unflattering portrait of the Trump family. Among the many claims was a particularly damaging one about Melania, that she was cold, distant, and had thrown a tantrum when her planned renovation of the White House Rose Garden was criticized by a historical preservation group. The book became an instant bestseller, and the media cycle was consumed by its revelations. Melania was on the defensive again. The narrative of the reluctant First Lady, the Ice Queen, was back with a vengeance. Michelle watched the coverage with a heavy heart. She knew how these moments worked. She had been the subject of vicious false rumors herself for years. The angry black woman trope had been used against her constantly. She knew the pain of being caricatured by people who had never met you. She picked up the phone. She called an intermediary, a mutual acquaintance who moved in Washington's social and philanthropic circles. She asked her to pass a message to Melania, a simple, private message of solidarity. "I know what it's like to be the target of a book like that. Stay strong." The message reached Melania in the White House residence. She read it twice, stunned. It was the last thing she expected. It wasn't an apology, and it wasn't an endorsement. It was simply an acknowledgement of a shared, difficult experience. In the cutthroat world of Washington politics, it was an act of profound humanity. For days, Melania wrestled with what to do. Her advisors, when they learned of the message, were suspicious. "It's a trick," they said. "It's trying to disarm you, to make you look weak." But Melania didn't see it that way. She saw it for what it was, a bridge. The opportunity to respond came sooner than she expected. A few weeks later, both women were scheduled to attend the same event in New York City, a gala for a children's hospital, a cause both had supported in the past. The idea of them being in the same room sent the media into a frenzy. Security was tightened, press credentials were at a premium, every move would be watched. Melania arrived first, looking elegant in a midnight blue gown. She worked the room with practiced grace, speaking with doctors, donors, and families. She was warm, engaging, and present. But a part of her was waiting. Then Michelle Obama arrived. The room seemed to shift. The energy changed. She was greeted with a swell of applause. She moved through the crowd, her smile bright, her handshakes firm. Their paths finally crossed near the silent auction tables. For a moment, they were just two women, surrounded by a bubble of Secret Service agents and stunned onlookers. The room seemed to hold its breath. Michelle spoke first. "Melania," she said, her voice warm but respectful, "it's good to see you." Melania met her gaze. "Michelle." There was a pause, a moment of profound silence in the midst of the roaring crowd. Then Melania spoke again, her voice so low only Michelle could hear. "Thank you for your message." Michelle's expression softened. "I meant it."
They stood there for another beat, a universe of unspoken words between them. Then, as quickly as the moment had arrived, it was over. They each moved on to other conversations. They did not pose for a photo. They did not have a long public chat. But in that brief exchange, a truce was forged. The media was disappointed. There was no catfight, no icy stare-down, just two women acknowledging each other's humanity. In the weeks that followed, the public feud subsided. Both women returned to their respective work. Melania continued her focus on foster care and digital literacy, finding a new confidence and authenticity in her efforts. She no longer seemed to be performing the role of First Lady. She was inhabiting it. Michelle, for her part, continued her global advocacy, but she also made a conscious effort to avoid direct commentary on the Trump White House. When asked about Melania in interviews, she would offer a simple, respectful response. "I wish her and her family well. The role of First Lady is a difficult one, and I respect anyone who takes it on." The story of Melania Trump and Michelle Obama was no longer a story of conflict. It had become a story of two women on opposite sides of a political divide who found a sliver of common ground in the shared, often surreal experience of being First Lady. They would never be friends. Their worldviews were too different, their loyalties too strong. But they had moved from being adversaries to something more complex, respectful observers of each other's journeys.
Years later, after Donald Trump's presidency had ended, Melania retreated from public life, focusing on raising Barron and managing their post-White House affairs. She rarely gave interviews, and even more rarely spoke about her time in Washington. But in one of those rare interviews, a journalist asked her about the most surprising moment of her tenure. She thought for a long time. "The moment I realized that the people you think are your enemies are not always your enemies," she said finally, "and the people you think are your friends are not always your friends." There was a moment in a crowded room when someone I had every reason to see as an opponent showed me more kindness than people in my own circle. It changed how I see things. She didn't mention Michelle Obama by name. She didn't have to. And in her own world, Michelle Obama, writing her second memoir, included a passage about the importance of grace, even in the face of political opposition. She wrote about the danger of dehumanizing your opponents, of reducing them to caricatures. She wrote about a quiet moment at a gala, a brief exchange that reminded her that beneath the titles and the policies, we are all just people, navigating our own complex realities. The story of their public debate faded into the archives of political history, a footnote in the tumultuous era. But the story of that single private moment of grace lived on, a testament to the quiet power of empathy in a world that thrived on conflict. They had stepped into the debate, and one of them had fired back, but in the end, it was a quiet word of kindness that had the most lasting impact. The baton, it turned out, was not for building or for passing. It was a reminder that we are all, in the end, just carrying our own weight. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is simply acknowledge the burden of another.